show it. In this case, I'm more interested in having us jump right in. So if you would take a meditative seat, whatever feels comfortable and appropriate for you today. And if you want to turn the camera so we're not staring at each other, you're welcome to, or turn it off for this, that's fine too, or leave it on, whatever's comfortable. And checking in with our bodies, noticing our posture, noticing our sense of connection. And checking in with our minds, noticing the quality of our mind at this moment. Is it open and spacious? Is it anxious and constricted? How might you describe it to yourself? And again, our goal isn't to try to force it to be one way or another. Our goal is starting to be clearer about what is. And so we're going to do this meditation in 4 parts. And we'll start off with just a focus on the breath. So start by taking 3 deep breaths, noticing where you feel it most, and place your attention there. And for the next few minutes, try to hold your attention on your breath. Allowing yourself to feel the sensation of the breath coming in and going out. And as you notice that you've lost your attention on the breath, or your attention has wandered somewhere, smile and release whatever was more interesting than the breath and come back to the breath. And as you notice that your attention has wandered, see if you can tell how you can tell. How do you know that your attention has wandered? What is it that can tell that you're not holding your mindfulness to your breath any longer? And so now for part two, as we're settled into our breath and our bodies, allow yourself to broaden your awareness, to become aware of all the things that you could be mindful of. These could be sights or sounds, they could be feelings, that could be feelings in the body or emotional feelings, could be thoughts. And if it helps to look around, to open your eyes, to close your eyes, see how broad you can make your awareness. What are all the things that you could pay attention to? I'm sure you've noticed lots of individual types of things that you could be mindful of. Now, see how many you can hold within your awareness at once. You're still feeling your breathing. You're still aware of what you're seeing. You're also aware of what you're hearing. Try to see how much you can hold at one time and what that feels like. Moving on to the third part. And for this part, let me explain before you go do it. But I'd like you to stand up and walk around wherever you are. And I'd like you to interact with things, pick things up, but do it so quickly that you don't think about picking it up. You just do it. And then try to figure out how your hand knew what shape to make to pick it up. Step over things. And then notice, how did you know how high to lift your foot to do it? Step around things, step on things, go through doors, close the door halfway and then go through it. But again, do it quickly enough that you're not really thinking about it, but notice how your body reacts to get through the door with it only halfway open. Notice that you have a feeling of trust as you go around and do these things. And when you don't trust something, can I step on that? Can I get over it? What do you do when you're not sure? So go ahead and take about 4 minutes. I'll call you back with the bell, but interact with things, move through your environment, and see if you notice how it is you know what to do to interact with things. Coming back to your seat, and we'll move on to the fourth part. And so once you've taken your meditative posture again, rather than focusing your mindfulness on a particular thing like the breath, notice that you are aware. In fact, you know you are aware. Where is that awareness? Turn your gaze inward. Who is it that knows? What is it that knows? Look for that seat of awareness within your mind. As you continue to turn your gaze to your awareness and your awareness of your awareness, see if you can tell, have you ever been without it? Are there moments where you're actually without the awareness? And now relaxing the questioning about our awareness and just sitting with our awareness open, allowing whatever comes into it to come into it, and whatever passes from it to pass from it. And 3 more deep breaths, feeling them all the way in and out. So there is a lot of emphasis these days on mindfulness, but that's only one piece of the picture of what we need to practice in order to familiarize ourselves with our minds. And in fact, it's the less important piece, if you ask me. Um, Today, we're going to talk about the more important piece. So, to start with the geeky stuff first, the term that usually gets translated into English as mindfulness in Sanskrit is smrti, S-M-R-T-I. In Pali, it's sati, S-A-T-I. In Tibetan, it's trenpa. If you really want to geek out, you can have them all. Uh, and mindfulness is a weird translation of it, actually. A much better translation would be recollection or remembering. And in the terms of recollecting, we're recollecting our scattered attention. We're remembering all of the parts, which includes the past, includes the future, that we're putting it all together so that we're seeing it clearly. We're mindful of how our situation right now fits in with why are we here and what is our intention for the future. And this is one of the problems I have. I have several problems with the modern definition of mindfulness, but it being just on the present moment is not accurate. It actually, that would be dismembering, not remembering our action within the continuity of our lives. And so it's really a memory word in the sense that we're not allowing ourselves to forget what we're doing and why we're doing it and what our and how it fits into the bigger picture. The contrasting word is samprajana, S-A-M-P-R-A-J-A-N-A, or in Tibetan, sheshin. Oh, and what is it in Pali? Sampana? I don't recall. But this would be translated, it's usually translated, again, overly simplified as awareness. But better ways of translating it that I think get at its richer meaning is presently knowing, or clear comprehension, or full awareness. And these two sides of mindfulness and awareness fit together very nicely. Mindfulness is what we use to hold our minds to any particular object. So when I say pay attention to your breath, your mindfulness is helping you to remember to do that. And whereas awareness is the intelligence that knows what we're doing. Both of these are intrinsic qualities of the mind. They're not something that you don't already have, but we pay much more attention generally to the mindfulness than we do to the awareness. So awareness never usually gets quite as strong as our mindfulness until we start practicing it. You could think, I've heard it said, mindfulness is the hand that holds the balloon, and awareness is the eyes that see you let go and it flew away. Because if you only had mindfulness, once your mindfulness, you're supposed to be paying attention to the breath. Once you get distracted by something, if mindfulness was all you have, you'd never know that you lost attention to the breath because now it's on something else. So there's some broader awareness that our mindfulness is within. Now, there are lots of other ways we could slice and dice our mental experience, so don't get too hung up on this approach as if it's, capital T truth. But I do find it a very helpful approach. Charlie Capgon says mindfulness uh, is what we're applying deliberately to become more cognizant, whereas awareness is gently being present. I think that's fair too. Um, the Dharma talks about mindfulness as uh, the function of it is to not be distracted from letting what one knows slip away from one's mind. So again, it has this remembering or remembrance aspect. You're remembering not to be distracted, whereas awareness is being in this state of mental openness and pliability. Um, Both of these are verbs rather than nouns. These are activities of the mind. Um, Awareness is a little tougher, I think, because it's underlying everything. And so just like we assume the fish doesn't understand the water it swims in, we don't really pay much attention to our own awareness. And in a sense, we that's allowed us to kind of accumulate crap on top of it to make it harder for us to see. So as we remove mental obscurations and sluggishness, we start seeing this openness of our awareness. Sometimes it's said the difference is one between being deliberate and one being spontaneous. I think we can be deliberate with both, actually. Again, though, we tend to not be very deliberate about our awareness. Um, but we can, and we can learn it, and we can, train it as a skill through meditation. This awareness is inseparable from our intrinsic nature of mind. So, what is this full awareness you are presently knowing? Well, you know the position of your body right now. You didn't know you knew it until I told you to pay attention to it, but you did know it. You know whether you're lying down or standing or sitting, right? You don't need to even think about knowing it, and yet you are aware of it. You're aware of the air temperature. You're aware of the size of the room, even though you're only looking one direction. You actually can sense the size of the room around you. You know whether there are other people in the room or not. Um, if I asked you to go upstairs, you would know whether you could lift your leg high enough to go up it or whether the stair is too tall. If I ask you to go through a narrow door, you can know whether you can fit through it without turning your shoulders, or if you need to turn your shoulders, or if even turning your shoulders isn't enough. How do you know this? You know how to pick up a cup. You reach down and you pick up a cup. And yet, the shape your hand would make to pick this up is different from the shape your hand would make to pick this up. But do you ever think about that? No, you just reach down and your hand makes exactly the correct shape. And you know when it doesn't because you knock it over. And yet that happens very rarely. Wow. So how are you presently knowing what shape to make your hand? And actually watch yourself picking things up through the day, and you will notice your hand makes a ton of different shapes, depending whether it's a pen, depending what you want to do with the pen. It actually will change the shape of your hand, what your intention is with it, whether you're picking it up, whether it has liquid in it or not, you'll pick it up differently. How do you do that? And you just know. That's not your mindfulness. That's knowing. You know whether the shower is too hot or cold. How do you know? You know if it's windy. How? You can't see it. You know if there's enough light to see. You know whether a ball is about to hit you or whether it's not. You know whether it's catchable or whether it's too far out of your reach. All these things you just know, you are aware of. Raise your arm right now. Notice that you can be aware. You know your arm is raised. How do you know your arm is raised? It takes no effort to be aware. In Zen, we call this your true self. Yes, you can think about raising your arm, but does that actually help you do it better? Not one bit. Thinking is a late evolutionary add-on. It's a filter that actually makes it harder to see reality a great deal of the time. I don't know if any of you are athletes, but if you play a sport, let's say tennis or golf or basketball, once you've actually gained some skill, if I ask you to think about your tennis swing, what does it do to it? It screws it up. So, why do we think our thinking mind is the important one? Well, it does lots of good things. I'm not saying it's not useful, it's very useful. But it's not the thing that really helps you most of the time. It's not the thing that tells you what you're doing. It's not the thing that tells you how to interact with the whole world. And it takes no effort to know. So not only is this aware self talked about sometimes as your true self in Zen, it's also, I think, and this is just my opinion, but it's one of the answers to one of the other Zen riddle statements where we talk about realizing no birth and no death. What the hell does that mean? Well, have you ever been without your awareness? No, even when you're asleep, if the pillow falls out, you reach up and get it, even without waking up. The only way most humans ever are without their awareness is you have to be so heavily drugged. It's something artificial. It's a totally artificial state, from, go get, Versed. It'll knock you out and you won't be able to remember anything. And yeah, so there's no awareness then, but that's an artificially induced state. In your actual human state, you've never been without your awareness. You don't remember your awareness coming into being either. When did your awareness start? You don't, there's, I've never met anyone who has a moment of, I recall being born. uh, Separate, I've had people say that they remember being born, but they don't remember their awareness being born. They were already aware. And then they recall being born. I don't know whether to believe them or not, because this is outside my experience, and I have no reason, I guess, to disbelieve it, although as a scientist, that seems odd to me. But as a good scientist, there's lots of things I don't know. So, okay, I have to be open to new data. But no one remembers their awareness turning on. So, why do you think it's going to turn off? Maybe this is an answer to no birth, no death. Regardless of those more philosophical questions, coming back to what are we practicing and why are we practicing it? If we're trying to be more mindful in our lives, we need to actually keep both smrti and sampajanya balanced and working together, both our mindfulness and our awareness. And as we become more in touch with the awareness side and we strengthen it, often this is where people start finding a lot of the real calm, because that awareness is always open. There is nothing you can do to have it not be open. You can ignore it. You can not pay any attention to it. You can let your mind get so cluttered with all sorts of little details you're thinking about that you're not paying attention. And yet still it's there holding you upright so you don't just fall over. How do you know to do that? Not just fall over when you're thinking so much. It's always there. It's always, and if someone walks into the room, even when you're deep in thought, you'll notice it. Sometimes they might have to say something to note. But again, if all we had was the mindfulness, you'd be stuck, locked into that. And so this open awareness is always present, this open spaciousness, or the way people often like to talk about in Buddhism, this luminous clarity of your mind that's open to all experience, which is never closed off, never so overwhelmed it can't hold one more thing in it. This is often a place of real peace when we can get in touch with it. So I'll stop here, and I'd be interested in people's reactions, in their observations from when you were doing the practice, and what did you notice, and any questions you have.
Doug, if you say that just because we don't realize awareness being turned on, it is a possible corollary that there is no reason to believe that it can be turned off. But at the same time, you're saying artificially through medication, there are moments when we don't feel awareness. Isn't death a similar experience on our brain that turns it off?
As a scientific materialist, I would say yes. That's my belief, actually.
Okay.
If you ask for my personal belief. And yet, there are other people who seem to have experiences that would suggest otherwise. So I'm not saying this is the answer, but I think it is an interesting question, at any rate, to ponder. Can I even imagine being without my awareness? Maybe I don't need to be quite so scared.
I think something interesting, and I guess as I was listening to what you were saying about how when you're holding something, the shape and the object. I just because I was thinking about that when we were actually holding things. I pay attention to, well, how do I know this shape, versus holding a cup versus a spoon? My hand automatically just starts with a different shape. So I was wondering, so is then awareness related to your personal experiences?
Mm, it's a good question. So the psychological answer is, how do I do this without being too tech geeky? We evolved in an environment that has very lawful relations between, say, light and shapes and sounds and actions and such, right? And so because we evolved perceptual systems that can detect information that is truly out there. The sun reflects off of surfaces in a very predictable way, pretty much 100% of the time. And so we have developed eyes that can pick up that information. And one of the best examples is the looking at a step and knowing whether you can lift your leg high enough, knowing whether your body fits it, looking at that gap and knowing whether you can twist your shoulders to get through it. On the one hand, that's an innate property of the human organism and our perceptual system. That doesn't mean we don't need to learn a little bit. We need to have some experience to start knowing how to pay attention to the information that exists in the environment. So the classic example of this, there's a study apparatus called the visual cliff. And what it is, and I'll find a photo so I can show you a little better. But it's a glass table, basically. And it's about 4 feet off the ground. Oops. There you go. Oops. So on one side of it, they put a tablecloth right under the glass. And on the other side, there's no tablecloth, although it's actually, there is a tablecloth, it's down at the bottom. I don't know if you can, probably best example here, right? And so when the baby's in the middle, you can have the mom call to it across the shallow side or the deep side. And a 12-month-old baby will go across the shallow side to its mom and never go across the shallow side or go across the deep side, showing that by 12 months of age, babies not only have good depth perception, but they also have a wariness of heights, and they're unwilling to cross over nothing, right? So that's kind of smart. So one of my old graduate advisors, Joe Campos, did a really clever thing where he had, so the average baby learns to crawl at about 7 months. Now you can't make a baby crawl sooner than it's going to crawl. But back in the 80s, there were these things called walkers, which were basically a little...
They exist now too.
Oh, that's right. They're back again, which is weird because they went off the market because too many babies died. As you'll understand from the rest of this research story. But basically, you put the baby's feet through it. It's got a table around them so they can't reach anything and get in trouble that way. And then the whole thing's on wheels. So as they pedal their feet, they can move around like Fred Flintstone's car. And so what he did is he randomly assigned families to either get or not get one of these walkers at 6 months of age. So a month before the average baby starts crawling. And as soon as they started crawling, he brought them into the lab and tested them on the visual cliff. The babies who didn't get one, when they started crawling, you brought them in and they would go across the deep end just as they begin crawling. The babies who had been assigned to have a walker for that month before, when they came in, they would not go over the deep end, which shows that just 1 month of experience self-locomoting is enough for us to learn how to notice when you move through the world, the pattern of information on your retina changes in a very lawful way. But you need some experience to be able to figure out what to pay attention to. So to come back to your question, is it learned? Is it learnable? It is definitely learnable. Is it there as an innate, awareness as well? Yes, it is that. So it's kind of a yes and that we can be aware. Many things we are without needing much. Sometimes just one experience is enough for us to learn from it. Sometimes maybe we don't even need any. And some species, for example, mountain goat babies don't fall off cliffs from the minute they're born. They're born already knowing what a cliff looks like, whereas babies need about a month of experience, and this is why these were pulled off the market, because too many babies died crashing down the stairs, before learning what a cliff edge looks like. So
it's a funny example. One of the earliest memory that I have, I don't know what age it is of being inside a stroller and looking down and realizing how far the ground is and being absolutely terrified. And my older brother was close to me, but I would just look down and it was just so far away. I was like, why did they put me in this thing? I don't want to be here. And it wasn't every experience in the stroller, because I only remember one, but that is the earliest memory that I have. So I guess we learn that things are far away pretty early on from being handled by parents and carried around.
It's not the handling, it is the self-locomoting that matters, actually.
Okay.
So if you carry the baby around, it doesn't become wary of the cliff edge on the visual cliff. It's only when they've had some experience self-locomoting that they then learn to pay attention to it.
Good. Well, my kids were in the walkers, both of them. We just kept the doors downstairs closed. So they were zooming around and oh, these things are unsafe. I don't care. I'm a busy mother. Go explore. And they develop differently. So as far as who started walking when and all that stuff, but
Sure.
They both run now.
Doug, I'm curious on that point, and I'm not sure how to put words to my thoughts here, so I'll give it the best shot that I can. You've talked about this awareness that comes with, in some cases, a little bit of a, you experience, and in some case, almost an innate knowing, right, wrong, this will hurt, this won't, etc. But then there's the a knowing that isn't necessarily always true, and it forms a bias for you because of experiences that you had. And so you can be aware of something, and it kind of reminds me to the last time we met and we talked about our sources of truth, right? And what we create as our truth around that thing. Is this also about understanding when to revisit that truth and re-examine? Is what I know really what I know, or is it one dimension of what I know, right? If that makes sense.
I think I understand. So let me give an answer, and I'd be interested in other people's answers to this question too. It's always useful to question what we think we know. That is never a bad idea. And then it's always a good question to ask, how do we know what we know? Or why do we think we know this thing? That's also, I think, very valuable. And if we think about mindfulness, I think of it as kind of, or use another synonym, like attention. What are you paying attention to? Well, attention is a little laser beam. When I'm looking here, I can't be looking here, right? And so I'm, unable to pay attention to pretty much 95% of my environment, because when I'm focused here, that's just, this little bit here. So our mindful attention is 95% wrong, always. It's 5% right, at best. Now, that said, that just because I'm really only paying attention right now, Elaine is up on my screen and I can see, what she looks like, and I can see, that she's blinking, and I can, see the expression on her face. I'm not seeing any of the others. If a bird flew into the window here, I would notice, because of course awareness is broader than just my mindful, attention. or I hope I would notice. So I tend to think about this, and this is just my point of view, that most of what I think I know is at best 5% correct and 95% wrong. And this is why it's so easy to get into arguments with people. You know, it was like this, it was like this. You're both wrong. And you're both right. You're both right about the little thing you were paying attention to. Our problem isn't that isn't what we know, and it isn't even what we don't know. Our problem is that we hold what we know as if it's complete. And so we're never going to, I mean, it's said when you become a full Buddha, you become omniscient. Again, that's, I don't even know what that means. So that's not one of my particular goals. But if I can at least maintain awareness that I have one tiny little viewpoint on things, and that doesn't make your viewpoint wrong, that's enough for me. Does that answer your question at all?
It does. Yeah, thank you.
Doug, I was wondering a couple of things. I was thinking about cultural variation on this theme, and how, you know, we know that in some cultures people's awareness seems so different than ours in terms of like being able to navigate the from the stars, you know, or, you know, special skills that people in various cultures have, maybe like reading signals differently than we do. And I guess that comes from experience. But then I was also thinking about, so there's like two really different questions here. I was also thinking about end of life, you know, if someone gets Alzheimer's, you know, we're talking about this being our true self. But then can't that awareness disappear? You know, we talked about under anesthesia or under certain drugs, we don't seem to have this awareness. But also, what happens if people get dementia, for example?
Sure. The correct answer is I don't know. If you want me to speculate, so I've had several family members with very severe dementia, to the point where my grandmother, for example, no longer knew who I was, no longer knew who her husband was, kept calling him her son. So I've seen that, and yet she knew if she was standing or sitting. She knew if she was hungry. She knew if, you know, so it, you know, in the sense of, you know, when you talk to her, she might not know who you were, and she may not know where she was, and yet she still was recognizable to me as who she was. Not all of who she used to be, certainly, but, you know, that sense of her, I'm going to start crying, sorry, but that sense of her never went away. It got limited. Is that because it was gone, or was that because she couldn't express it or access it the same way? And I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna chime in here, Doug.
Yeah.
So or Douglas, I tend to, for me, awareness, even if I'm under anesthesia, is still there.
Not enough drugs.
Yeah, or any kind of drugs. You know, well, let's do legal right now. Because the heart is still beating, the blood is still going, so there, you know, all of that all those functions, just like moving, and it's the same thing as moving my hand. I don't know what does this, but, my brain may not register or record it in the same manner as whatever. But, and then awareness for me, I guess mindfulness and awareness, I don't split them out. But awareness for me is I'm aware of a lot more, but I can only hold so much. So that's where the focus comes in. There's probably, I don't know, I can't remember how many million points that they know that we're quote unquote aware of. But it just gets overwhelming. So my brain says, okay, here's how much, and I don't know if my brain does more or less than your brain, than someone else's brain. Those kinds of things I don't know. But for me, that it makes perfect sense and help you, so I don't know if that helps anybody else. But
it helps me, actually. I think you clarified something that I wasn't clear about, which is perhaps what's missing under, say, anesthesia is the meta awareness, the awareness that I'm aware, right? So I no longer know that I'm aware of things, and yet, oh, this is embarrassing. So anytime I go in for some type of surgical procedure, I have to warn the doctors because so when I had my vasectomy, I knew I'm a big wimp and I wanted to be out. Like some men just go in and just do it under local and then get on their motorcycle. Whereas I said, no, I don't want to have any memory of this, right? I don't want to feel tugging. No, none of that. I don't want that. And so I had scheduled for general anesthesia. The anesthesiologist came in, he says, well, what do you feel about instead of that doing what's called a waking sleep, where you're not under as deeply, you can still respond to commands. I said, will I remember anything? He said, no. I said, fine, I don't care. It's less dangerous than going under full general. This was a bad decision because halfway through the procedure, I decide, that awareness side of me, it decides it's not having fun. And I start punching and kicking. Yeah. Feet don't fail me now. I'm getting So after this, after they had strapped me down and put me all the way under, they had to come out afterwards and say to my wife, you're going to notice a lot of extra cuts and bruising.
No.
Because I started punching and kicking to get off the table while under the knife. So I think this is my personal experience that lends some support to what you were saying, Jay, that yes, I may no longer be aware that I'm aware, but that doesn't mean awareness is gone.
I have an example of how much we do, how much we are aware of our own entity. And my example comes when it was taken away, but not in the general anesthesia kind of way. I take this really well in a very kind of a textbook stuff. But when I was having my child here at Mary Greeley and I asked for an epidural, here they give you a one-time shot and it was pretty strong. So not only did I get numb the way I wanted, not to feel contractions, no, not contractions, these things, contractions. I lost all feeling in my legs from the waist down. And that was terrifying because they were there, but I didn't feel anything in them. And I was just panicking. I don't understand why that feeling of not feeling your legs, while your mind knows that it's temporary and they're there, your eye can see. Some other part of my mind was just screaming in panic. And I asked my husband to constantly touch them because that feeling of touch made me feel better that they are there and they're mine. And it didn't get better until the feeling came back and it started wearing off and it came back. So from there, I realized that we do constantly perceive our body in space, and we constantly have the feeling from our limbs and our face and the hair and the skin. It's feeling things nonstop, and it does, you're right, create the cocoon of, I guess, feeling and comfort and awareness that this is me, whatever me is, and it's perceiving all these things through the senses, various senses, all 5 of them plus the 6th one. And so that's how I define awareness now. It's there even when I just don't focus on it. That was my example. My question is, do you think that good awareness could be a hindrance to good mindfulness, i.e. focus? Because when I was trying to do the exercise at the beginning, I realized that, oh my gosh, here comes again, I'm such a fidgeter. I sit, I'm trying to pay attention to my breath, but there's a hair in my face. Oh, and I'm thirsty right now too. Oh, and there's the noise from the basement and the whiff of air from who knows where. And I was just sitting there thinking, why now? Why, when I'm trying to focus on one thing, which is breathing, I am experiencing everything from all the 5 senses that I have? Is it some kind of a wrong direction for an awareness, some hyper awareness? What is going on?
I think, and this is just my speculation, that it is not different from other times, only because you're paying attention to what you're paying attention to, you're noticing it differently. That our ability to hold our focus on one thing intentionally is pretty weak. And we don't notice that because it's all a continuous stream, that I'm noticing this, then I'm thinking that, then I'm noticing, and it seems continuous enough that we don't actually notice that, in fact, it's tremendously scattered. But when you're trying to then hold your attention, maintaining it in one place, then it becomes more noticeable to us how many things we're aware of and how those things pull our attention to them. And so I think most of the time it happens anyway, we just don't notice it because it's not the opposite of what we're trying to do in that moment. That's my guess. Does that feel about right to you?
Yes, I think so. And I just thought, as I'm trying to meditate, it's very similar to my kids being sent to bed, because suddenly I'm thirsty. I want to go to the bathroom. And I don't think they're consciously stretching the bedtime. They really, at this point, realize that when they're supposed to come down and sleep, that, the body's sending all these signals that were ignored up until then, that there needs to be water or restroom or motherly attention or anything else, because it's so darn hard to focus on just trying to go to sleep. Yes, thank you. Over.
Other thoughts, questions?
So another thought, I also found, I guess I find this concept super interesting. I really haven't paid attention or I guess never thought about awareness and mindfulness. To me, they're always, when I hear those 2 words, it feels like it's kind of just the same thing, so I can use them interchangeable. But the other piece that is just interesting is when you were talking about awareness and always being there. I think what I thought about awareness was very different. I always thought about awareness as being conscious. So when I'm not conscious about something, then I'm thinking I am not aware or I don't have any awareness. So sometimes when I was thinking about moments where maybe I was not aware, I was thinking times where maybe I drove from home to work and I didn't even know how I got to work. So to me, those were moments where I didn't have any awareness. But I guess obviously now listening to you, it's just interesting to know that your awareness is always there. So it's just a very different way of seeing and just relearning that concept. So it's been really interesting.
Yeah, and these, as I say, this is just one way of slicing and dicing it. That it's not truth. It's a way of trying to help us be clearer about what our experience is and how our minds are functioning. I think, again, if we take the, if we split out the awareness of awareness, the meta awareness, then what you're describing on your drive is you were distracted the whole way and were not aware of what you were doing. And yet you never drove off the road. You didn't run into other people. You got to where you were going. Therefore, you were aware.
Mm-hmm.
But you weren't aware of what you were paying attention to. Are these important distinctions? Yeah, I think it depends whether they help you be clearer about what your mind is doing. I mean, that's, again, all these things, it's not just about philosophy. You can, if you want more of this, go study the Dharma, which will bring your mental experience down to atoms of mental experience, basically, and has been categorized lots of different ways. And you can either easily get lost in those details as if somehow each of them is really important, or you can say, I see the way I'm thinking more clearly now, and this is not a helpful way of thinking. And that's, for me, what the goal is. So if it helps you to think of it in these terms, then good. And if it doesn't, if it just, you easily just get too distracted by trying to find the line between them, and end up burning dinner because of it, then maybe that's not good.
No, I think it's helpful, and I guess you answer that was gonna be my next question. So is it really I guess what's the benefit or what's the importance, obviously, of being aware in that way? So because yeah, I mean, we talk about being aware and know what we're thinking, but then how is that does that make any difference in how we do things? Does it change our brains? Does it change the way we react or do things? So that was going to be my next question.
Yeah, no, and that's the important question here. That's the so what question, which I always think of as the most important scientific question. I've said this previously in certain ways, but I think it relates directly here. We're not in this practice trying to stop thinking. That would be a type of self-harm. Trying to force a pretend way of being over who we really are. What we're trying to do is to recognize when our conceptual mind is leading to benefit and when it is, making things less clear. And if you notice walking around your apartment or driving your car, that you don't even need to think about any of it. And yet you can do and eating and sleeping and 90% of what you need to do in a day, you don't need to think about. And yet we believe our thinking self is the important part. And so we over apply it, and we seek conceptual answers, when many times the conceptual answer is at best only partially true. Why are you sad? Well, yeah, I can give you an answer. But does that truly explain it? And if you just respond to the words of my answer, do I actually feel better? Or do I want you to touch that heart of sadness that is beyond words and just hold my hand? and say, it'll be okay, even when both of us know those words are wrong. It's not necessarily going to be okay. But that's it doesn't matter, because it's not about the words as much as it's about the presence. So I think this way of thinking about it, recognizing that I can trust, and I do trust. I trust it when I pick up a glass. I trust it when I get into the car so I don't hit my head. I trust it when I know the door is closed and I need to open it. Uh, but I don't often trust it in lots of other places. I think I want to, when I claim I want to understand, what I usually mean by that is I want a label. Well, the label is only ever partially right. What if I let go of that clinging need for the label and conceptual comprehension and go for what is it I'm actually noticing here? I'm aware this other person near me is sad. I don't know what it means. I don't know why. I don't know what they need. Maybe a better question than why are you sad is, how may I help you? And that's trusting myself better. That's trusting the other person better. That's not needing a reason. That's just being open to what is my situation, what is my relationship, and then what is my correct function in this situation and relationship. And so in my style of Zen, we make a big deal out of trying to let go of conceptual mind, not get rid of. Know when it's useful and apply it then, and other than that, don't. So if we're, there's so much focus on the kind of cutting through conceptual mind, there's not much talk about what is it that's left once you do that. And then it's when it is talked about, it's usually talked about in these metaphorical statements like true self. But I don't know what my true self is in a conceptual way. But I do know when something feels true to me. How do I know that? Can I trust that? I can if I practice trusting it. Does that help?
Yes, yeah. I think there's a lot of reflection to do, when you hear that. It's like, wow, it just opens the door for for a brand new world, I think, when you start thinking about awareness in that way and letting go of some of these things and trusting. So it's really interesting.
My experience is it's a much more vibrant world.
Doug, you mentioned that some 90% of things we do during the day.
Made up number, by the way.
Yes, but a majority of things will just get done. They don't require this active focus. But I would want to add to that what happens is those things that we're doing because we're so accustomed to doing them, like driving or washing dishes or cooking, at that time our mind is engaged in that cycle of thinking, labeling, criticizing, analyzing, comparing, which I find is not helpful at all. And so my goal has been to notice that that's what the mind is doing and then come back to what the body is doing and focus on that. It's been many, many times that I would drive from work to home and I don't remember how I did it. I did it safely, but it's not really, I don't remember how I did the whole trip, but I don't remember when was the last time I paid attention to the road. And I thought, I don't like that. And so then I consciously make an attempt to look at the road, and maybe I listen to the music, but don't go into more of a daydreaming and analyzing what happened at work. And the same with doing chores at home. If I find myself trapped in thinking what I read on Facebook at that moment, then I better, let me look at the sponge. Let me look at the soap at the sponge. Let me look at the bubbles it makes and how it smells and how long does it take to clean this dish and how hot the water is. And I found that to be so much more liberating while it sounds so menial. But the soap on the sponge is better than thinking over what was written on Facebook. It may make me less intelligent person because I'm not in the loop, but I like the soap on the sponge.
But no, and this is exactly the practice. This is a great practice. In fact, you've also just described most of koan practice, by the way, because most of the answers to a bunch of koans are come back to what do you see, smell, taste, touch here in this moment. That we spend so much time distracted from the moment that a lot of what we're trying, a lot of this practice really is just, can we come back to what's really here? What am I aware of? What am I doing? So that's a great, the way you describe it, perfect practice for, not only for focusing a little bit more on awareness, but also about recognizing when it's skillful and when it isn't.
Now, that soap on the sponge, is that awareness or is it mindfulness? Because I got
blended.
Both?
Yeah.
Blended. Okay.
And again, this is why it's a somewhat artificial distinction. When you are mindful of paying attention to a particular thing, you're also aware of that thing and you're aware that you're paying attention to it. So they're not wholly separate functions. They certainly, at a minimum, they inform each other, and at a maximum, maybe they're the same thing. And I don't know. But I do know I'm calmer when I'm letting more balance be on the side of awareness than on mindfulness a lot of the time. But that's not always true. Sometimes just focusing on what am I doing right now, that's all mindfulness, that's calming too. So experiment.
So
Thanks. Over.
I have one quick awareness story. One would take too long, but I have one quick one. So does everybody know the thing, the Where's Waldo? Or the magic book where you look for stuff, what Where's Waldo is, and you're looking and they're trying to find all the Waldos or whatever. Mm-hmm. One thing that I found myself doing is I would wake up in the morning, and when I would automatically try to figure out what's different. So it was almost like, so every day I'm waking up and scanning the room and looking for now what's different, which is, so it's a Where's Waldo type of thing. But what that did is that froze everything. What I had a preconception of what it should have looked like, and then what I thought it really looked like, and I was doing comparisons between those two, and it was not the best way to wake up in the morning. I'll just tell everybody that. So it's just a fun story. All right, I'm done.
I've heard some people use the waking up in the morning as a place of where they see that difference between awareness and usually thinking mind, because when you wake up and you feel the sheets and you notice that it's light, in that moment before you start thinking what's happening there, and for many of us, maybe we don't even notice that moment. But you can start trying to pay more attention to it, and you can also try to stretch it. Just do the feeling and awareness of yourself and your surroundings before you get into thinking about what do I need to do today. And that's often a place where it's easier to differentiate them. Any other comments or questions? We're about out of our scheduled time. Not that that really matters to me.
I do have one question. So I guess made a comment. We were talking about being aware and also like how important it is to be aware of, again, maybe how somebody else is feeling, right? So let's say I'm seeing this person and I know I'm aware that this person is feeling sad, or that, they might need a personal, they might need to feel touch. But I know there are many times where I personally haven't been aware of that. So I guess my question is, so how do you cultivate or how do you grow that awareness so you learn to become aware of those moments when, or to read those emotions on other people? Like, what do you do to learn that piece?
It's a good question. I think the traditional answer in Buddhism is where I tend to, again, somewhat artificially break meditation techniques into those that are familiarizing, that help us see our own habits of mind, become more familiar with what does our mind do, and then those that are cultivating, those that now help us to gain new habits of mind. And so I think the traditional answer would be there are several cultivating techniques on cultivating compassion and loving kindness. And I guess what I don't know, or I've never thought about before at least, is how does that actually make us more aware of how receptive we are, or how empathetic we are.
Mm-hmm.
My experience is people who have done these types of practices for a long time do become very, or they at least seem to me to be very empathetic and aware of the emotional currents around them. I guess I don't know how that works.
Do you feel like through your experience, so from when you started practicing and now, do you feel like you have become maybe more aware of those emotions or behaviors and things like that?
What I am aware of is I'm more aware now of my impulses in reaction. Now, maybe I'm also more aware of what's out there. I don't know that I can see with a fine-grained enough lens to actually know whether that's changed a whole lot for me. I assume it has, but I guess I don't feel that difference. But for example, I was at a retreat a couple of years ago, and it got into a lot of difficult places for people. Most of the retreat was on racism, and it was intense. And there was a point at which not only was I aware of how raw everyone was, but what I noticed that was different, I guess, again, what have I noticed about my development, is I noticed that little impulse, like to hold someone's hand. So there were several times where someone next to me was upset and I would just reach over and hold their hand, or someone was down a few rows and was silently crying. So I got up and I took her a tissue. I noticed that I was more responsive. Maybe that little feeling like, maybe I should do something was there.
Mm-hmm.
What I notice is I'm better at noticing it and then not holding myself back from doing it. I think that's where I've noticed my changes have been, is I'm more willing to go with the impulse and more willing to notice it, rather than before, when I either would have ignored it because it made me uncomfortable that someone else was upset,
Mm.
where I would have said, "Oh, I should do something, but I don't know what to do." And I don't really know who that person is, and so I'm just gonna, it was more self-protective, I guess. So that's what I've noticed. Now, am I more aware of the people around me? Maybe, but I am more aware of being willing to take an action if I see that an action might help.
That's amazing. I think that's one thing, I guess through all these practices and doing some of this that I want to be able to do. I do, when you mentioned having that feeling, like, like, oh, I know this person maybe is feeling something and I should do something, but you don't trust that feeling and you just hold back. I feel like it must be liberating just to be able to just act on that impulse and that feeling and trusting that. So that's really amazing.
Yeah, liberating is a good word. Yeah, there's a lot less second guessing.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's scary. I've walked into the middle of actual physical fights because of it, and I'm not sure I would have claimed that was a liberating feeling, but it did stop them from beating the hell out of that one guy. So that was good. But yeah, it is about trusting. For me, it's about trusting. And in fact, this is my definition of an enlightened being, and I'm not trying to claim I am. But I can see that if I practice this is the direction it's going, is, the enlightened being trusts the next moment will be workable. Not good, not necessarily enjoyable, but whatever it is that comes up, it can work with that. I think that's my definition of an enlightened being. And so a lot of my practice has been trying to just not worry so much about what's this next moment going to be, but go in with open awareness and let things unfold and know that I can work with whatever it is, or hope I can. Wasn't so sure about that fight, because those 5 guys who were beating up the other one, they were a lot bigger than I was.
So it sounds like, Douglas, you've been putting out a lot of welcome mats.
That's an interesting way of putting it. I think I'm just trying not to limit my experience as much. Not trying to stay within my pre-believed cocoon of what I can handle. And that is liberating. Turns out I can handle a whole lot more than I thought I could. And I'm no different from you guys.
We just need to learn to trust, or personally, I just need to trust some of that.
And that's a gradual process.
Yeah.
You don't have to do it all at once. Well, I see several people are needing to go, so why don't we say goodbye today, and thank you for joining me and sharing.
Thank you,
Thank
Doug.
you so much. Thank you. I'll be reflecting a lot on this conversation, so thank you.
And I'll be in touch with whatever the next month's program will be once I figure that out. And Jay, I've gotten your messages. I haven't talked to Dr. Sweet yet, but I will. And
Okay.
maybe that,
Yeah.
if that
Thank you.
can't happen for next month, it can at some point in the future.
Yeah, because I got some people waiting for the Tong Lin stuff, and I don't want to give them the other stuff that I have, because the stuff that's there, it was the best for me. So, but I didn't print it off because I've had access to it for the last 5 years. So.
Yeah. I understand.
All right, let me
All right.
know.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Have
Thank
a
you
good
all.
holiday. Thank you.